The topic we're talking about is what I like to call warm foods. And this is the third holistic tip that I'm giving today. The first one we talked about water. The second one was called no mucus. The third tip is warm foods. Now, for people who don't know who I am and you're new to this channel, my name is Dr. Michael House. I'm a holistic doctor. I also do acupuncture, and I'm a doctor of Oriental Medicine for 2 decades, and I've literally helped thousands of people to get healthy by teaching them, because my definition of doctor is healer and teacher. But you got to understand, I need to teach you so you can help me help you. Because if you go home and eat wrong and do things wrong, no matter what I do, it's going to negate everything. It's like, what do you build your house on? Sand or rock? And so we're going to give you this easy 3-step ways to build your house and your health on rock, okay? And so there's 2 ways to make energy in our body. Our lungs make energy into air, and our lungs like cardiovascular exercise, water. What they hate is fire, smoke. So you can't convince me that smoking medical marijuana is good for you. You're going to need to eat it or use it in oils of different type, because smoke and fire is never good for your lungs. Mucus is not good at all. And we talked about that. That mucks up your lungs. And air irritants like dander, dust, pollen, chemicals. And they actually say the inside of your house is more toxic than the outside of your house. And actually, if you go on Dr. House, approves on my website at all natural healing srq.com. Once again, that's all natural healing srq.com. Go where it says Dr. House approves, and you'll see they have these little filters now that filter the air. They're ionic filters, and they're only like $40. And you literally should have one in your bedroom, because you spend a third of your life in your bed, and you should have one in the great room that you stay in, because actually the inside of our house is more toxic than the outside of our house, and I explained that in the previous video. And so the second way we get energy is our digestive system, okay? What happens is when you eat food, it goes into your stomach, and then your stomach acid dissolves the food into liquid, and then it goes down into your stomach, into your intestines, and that's where it gets the nutrients out. Now, when I say warm foods, what I'm talking about is all foods have nature. We've talked about the mucus-forming foods and how you're supposed to stay away from them. But some foods are cold, some foods are cool, some foods are neutral. This is the temperature. Some foods are warm, some foods are hot. I know you know about the hot foods, jalapenos, habaneros. Now, the coldest food in the world is watermelon. So they say don't eat watermelon in the wintertime because it's going to make you too cold. The hottest food is lamb. I know a lot of people don't eat lamb, but when you eat lamb, they give you mint jelly to cool it down, because they say don't eat lamb in the summertime, it's too hot, you eat it in the wintertime, okay? Now, what that really means, okay, you see people always talk about eating raw foods. Raw foods are good for us. Oh, you got to eat everything raw. Okay, there's 2 misnomers about that, okay? I always say, look at vegetarians and vegans. They're usually the most skinny, emaciated people you've ever seen. Okay, and then they talk about, I don't want to eat anything that's alive because I don't want to kill it. Who says plants aren't alive? Just because you can't hear them scream doesn't mean they're alive. Look at a time-lapse video of grass or whatever growing. It moves. It moves just like us. Just because we can't watch it doesn't mean it's alive. So that's ridiculous. We need to have some type of protein, and you can get protein from meat, so you can get it from beans or nuts. But typically in America, we do meat. Okay, and so then there are people who eat a lot of red meat. Now think about it. You're sitting there chewing a steak, and after a while you just get sick of chewing it, so you swallow a hunk. And they say the average American has 5 pounds of undigested red meat in their bowels. Pretty gross. So I'm going to make this really simple, okay? So anytime you have like a tummy ache or anything at all, you want to do warm liquid or warm broth, because what you're actually doing, the tummy likes to be warm, it doesn't like to be cold. And the reason it gets cold is because people either drink when they eat, and that dilutes the stomach acid. So you're not supposed to drink 15 minutes before or 20 minutes after. Or they do mucus forming foods that coat the stomach acid so the stomach gets cold and it can't digest. And then anything that's hard to chew is hard for our tummy to break down. And so when you drink warm liquid or warm broth, you're doing the job of the stomach because it's already liquid and the stomach likes to be warm. So anytime tummy ache, you put warm in and warm pressure on your stomach. Now the thing that the stomach hates the most are raw foods that are hard to chew. So literally raw nuts are the worst thing on earth for us. You need to have roasted nuts. Things like raw celery, raw carrots, you need to steam those. Things like raw apples, you want to bake them. You can also have food combination. They put cinnamon with apples. I talked about earlier about the sushi. They give you wasabi ginger because it's hot, not because it tastes good. It's to help warm that up. And then I talked about the lamb. They give mint to cool it down, okay? So what goes on is the cold, cool, and neutral foods we can never eat raw because our body can't break those down to get the nutrients out. And then people say, well, if you cook them, you're cooking the nutrients out. Okay. So there's nutrients in them. But if your body can't break those foods down to get the nutrients out of them, it doesn't really matter. Second, I talked about earlier in the video, they're over-farming our farmlands. There's no nutrition in our farmlands. And they're picking things before they're ripe. For instance, a banana. When you buy a banana, it's green. People say, well, I have to let it ripen. It only ripens on the vine. And so you let it sit around. And you're like, well, it's going to get ripe, I'm going to eat it. It just starts to die. So you eat it for the potassium, but they pick it prematurely. There's no potassium in it. They're painting apples red. They're painting oranges orange. The other day I was eating an apple and someone called me. I had to put it down. I go back. I could see the red dye going down in there. It's crazy. I mean, the whole thing about red dye number 4. You ever seen that? Well, what happened was they came out with red dye number 1. The FDA saw that they had carcinogen in it, so they just added a different ingredient. It took another year, so they made red dye number 2, and it takes another year for the FDA to catch up. Then they made red dye number 3. I think some of the dyes are up to 2024. And so, you want to eat fruits and vegetables, but you want to get them locally grown if you can. Organic, of course, but locally grown. I got some raspberries like a month ago. I think they were from like Argentina. Don't tell me they were ripe. They'd be rotten time they got here. Okay? So you want to find a local produce that's been vine ripened. And actually, in China, they're called barefoot doctors. And what these doctors do is they walk around in these different regions and they pick the herbs in the regions, and those regions have the herbs for those diseases. So you're really only supposed to eat fruits and vegetables that grow in the region you're in. Okay, if you're living up in Canada, the last thing you should be eating is tropical fruit. It doesn't work. It's not for you. You need to live in the tropics to eat that. In fact, in China, they eat organ for organ. Let's say you got bad heart. They tell you eat heart. Let's say you got bad liver. Eat liver. And it's crazy. I mean, they're eating things like monkey jujubes and tiger penis for ED. I don't know about you. I think I would probably stay away from that. But, that's another time for another subject. But so the hot and the warm foods, you can eat raw. But most people right now, I say you need to cook everything, okay? So what happens is the first meal of the day, it could be breakfast, it could be lunch, it doesn't really matter. It needs to be warm and mushy, okay? So your stomach's a muscle. You haven't used that muscle since the night before, so it's asleep like you're asleep, and then you get up and you start eating raw nuts or raw fruit. That's like going to the gym 2 minutes after you wake up and wanting to bench 200 pounds. You're not going to do that. You don't want to do that. Your stomach wants to warm up. And you can't do warm liquid or warm broth because there's no really much nutrition in that. So you want to eat something warm and mushy. Oatmeal, make it with water, filtered water, of course. I even tell people I eat cherry apple pie. I mean, you have the whole day to wear off all that. This morning I had wonton soup because I had it left over from last night. Who says you have to have breakfast food for breakfast? Whoever made up that rule? I think breakfast food's so boring myself. I like eating other stuff. There's a saying, eat breakfast like a prince, lunch like a king, and feed your dinner to your enemies. What do most Americans do? Skip breakfast, small lunch, huge dinner. And the reason they say that is because your stomach and digestive system work the best between 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. 12 hours later is when they work the worst. 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. That's why you feed your dinner to your enemies. But what really goes on is gravity pushes food through your body. And let's say you eat dinner and then an hour later you go to bed and you lay down and you still have food in your stomach because you drank while you were eating or you ate mucousy foods and it couldn't digest it. And so you lay down for bed and gravity's pushing food around. Well, it's probably going to come back up your neck and acid reflux, GERD, indigestion, heartburn. Another thing, when you sleep, you're usually supposed to sleep on your left side, not your right side, because the stomach is like a little bag. And when you sleep on your left side, if you do have anything in your stomach, it will hold it. But if you sleep on your right side, upside down. Okay? But the thing is one serving size. People always say, well, what's a serving size? A serving size is as big as your fist. Now, we all have different people. We have different fist size. Okay? When I do acupuncture points are literally like this. And so what they taught us, they said the thumb is 1 sun, C-U-N. Your hand is 3 sun. So when we do measurements, we have to do sun measurements. And let's say Shaquille O'Neal walks in here. I don't know, he's like 7'6". For me to find his acupuncture points, I have to look at his hand and measure him up with his hand. And see, I always tell people, God made our hands as measuring tools. And you'll see fat people never have fat hands because it's God showing us what you're supposed to eat. So a serving size, 1 fist. That's when you smash up all your food that much, okay? So let's say you're having fruit. It's going to be a little bit more. Let's say you're having vegetables, a little bit more because it's water. Now, you're never supposed to eat more than 2 serving sizes on your plate. When I was a little kid, I had a little fist, and my mom would be sticking all this food on my plate and saying, well, eat it. There's starving people in China. And I was always like, well, take it to them. I don't want it.